All right, guys, here it is, section 11.8. This is going to be our last section of not only this unit, but also this entire school year. And fortunately, it's a pretty easy one. We're going to be talking about equations of circles, and it's really not too hard to work through most of the stuff in this section. So let's go ahead and jump in. First of all, let's think about writing the equation of a circle. So we've got this diagram here where the center of our circle is going to be some point h comma k. And then we've got some other point on our circle, which we're just going to call x comma y. So if you think about it, your distance, and you can think about it almost as a right triangle, is going to be from h to x. So that would be a distance of x minus h. And then to get up to that point, that would be a distance of k to y. So that would be y minus k. And then keep in mind that the distance directly from C to P is just a radius of our circle. And so what we can actually do is we can use Pythagorean theorem to come up with the formula for the circle, or the equation of our circle. So remember, Pythagorean theorem says that if we take a squared plus b squared, that should equal c squared. So let's do this. We're going to let a be this x minus h. We're going to let b be the side y minus k. And we're going to let c be our radius. Now keep in mind, c has to be the radius. While you can have a and b switched around, usually we write x first and then y, so that's why I'm choosing a to be the x minus h and b to be the y minus k. So when you fill those into our formula, we're going to take a squared, which is the parentheses x minus h squared, plus b squared, which is the parentheses y minus k squared, and set that equal to c squared, which is our radius being squared. In fact, that is the equation for a circle. And so we've got that definition, or rather that equation written right here in this box for you guys. So again, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals the radius squared. And so keep in mind, when you're looking at this equation, it's always going to be, for the center, the opposite of the number you see inside the parentheses. So minus h would be a positive h, minus k would be a positive k, and for radius squared, that would be our radius is just r. In other words, you'll take the square root of that number to get your radius. So it's usually best to think opposites, and I'll kind of share with you guys kind of some more information on how that works as we continue on. Now we do have a special type of circle, any circle that has its center at the origin, which, remember, the origin is the center of our coordinate plane. It is at 0, 0. Then we're not going to have the parentheses, and we're not going to have the h and k values, because those are both going to be 0. And so then our formula for a circle looks quite a bit more simple. It's just x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Okay, so let's first just do some practice with finding the center and the radius for each of these circles that we've got equations for here. So first of all, for the center, you're going to take the opposite of the numbers inside the parentheses. So opposite of negative 6 is going to be positive 6. Opposite of positive 2 is going to be negative 2. So the center of our circle is going to be at 6, negative 2. So then to find the radius, we're going to take the square root of this number right here. So the square root of 49, which is 7, and there would be our radius, along with the center of our circle. All right. So we'll do the same thing on this next example. First of all, looking for the center of our circle. Again, we're just going to take the opposite of the two numbers we see inside the parentheses. So opposite of 3 is negative 3. Opposite of 2 is negative 2. There would be our center. Next, for the radius, we will take the square root of our number on the other side. So that would be the square root of 5. And actually, square root of 5 cannot be simplified. So at that point, you've actually are done. Now you could find a decimal for it, but we'll just keep all of our answers as exact. So we'll just leave that as the square root of 5. All right, for this next example, for our center, notice that we do not have any numbers inside the parentheses. So I guess the opposite of nothing is just 0. So this would be an example where our circle is centered at the origin, so that would be at 0, 0. And then for our radius, we're going to take the square root of 16, which the square root of 16 can be simplified. That's just 4, and there would be our center and radius. All right, and last example that's kind of like this. Let's take a look at it. We've got x squared plus y minus 3 squared is equal to 9 over 16. First of all, for our center, x does not have anything inside a parentheses, so opposite of nothing would be 0. Y does, though. Opposite of negative 3 would be positive 3. So there would be our center. For the radius, we will take the square root of 9 over 16. In order to do that, we will go ahead and take the square root of 9 and the square root of 16. So we'll separate that first. And the square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 16 is 4. So our radius is going to be 3/4. Okay. So now let's go the other direction. Now that we know how to find the center and radius from an equation, let's talk about how to write an equation from the center and radius. So when we write our equation, we're going to go ahead and set it up first as x, y, and then our radius, which I'm just going to copy down as 4 squared. So here's kind of your starting setup is you're going to have two sets of parentheses. X is going to be in one, y is going to be in the other, and then on the other side of your equation, your radius is going to be squared. And then remember those numbers in parentheses are opposites of the numbers for your point. So if your center is at positive 3 for x, opposite would be negative 3. And then for y, opposite of negative 1 would be plus 1. And then really the only thing you would have left to do is simplify your radius being squared. 4 squared is 16. So we'll copy down the rest of the equation and set that equal to 16. Okay, let's look at some more examples of this. So for the next example, let's go ahead and set it up. Once again, we'll set up our two parentheses being squared. The other side is our radius being squared. That's 5 squared. So I'm just going to copy that down as 25. And remember, we'll put x and then y. And so opposite of negative 6 would be plus 6 for x. Opposite of negative 3 would be plus 3 for y. And then actually, since we've already simplified that 5 squared is 25, here would be our equation. Okay. So for this next example, notice that our center is at 0, 0. That should be pretty easy. Remember, when that happens, it's just going to be x squared plus y squared. No parentheses because there's not going to be any numbers to put there. Now for our radius squared, we're going to have to do a little bit of work for this one. We're going to have to take 2 over 3 and square it. When we do that, that's going to be taking the number 2 squared and also the number 3 squared. So then you have x squared plus y squared equals, and for our fraction, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, so that would become 4 over 9. All right, last example here, and then we'll take a look at what these look like on some graphs. So our center is at negative 9, 1, and radius is at the square root of 14. So let's first just set up our two parentheses being squared. And then for our radius squared, remember when you take a square root and square it, your square root and your exponent of 2 cancel, so our radius would just be 14. So then remember, we're going to have x and y inside those parentheses, and we're going to take opposites of our point for the center. So opposite of negative 9 would be plus 9. Opposite of positive 1 would be negative 1, and there would be our equation. Okay, so now let's take a look at what these look like in terms of some graphs. So notice we've got two different graphs of some different circles, and let's go ahead and write the equation for these circles based on their graph. Let's start with this equation for circle A, which is the larger circle on this first example. Notice that the center for that first circle is at 0, 0. So that's going to help us with writing our equation. Remember, 0, 0 is where we can just say x squared plus y squared. Then we'll look at our radius, which to get from 0, 0 out to a radius, that radius is going to be a distance of 10. So remember, we need to take that radius and square it. That's going to be 10 squared, which the number 10 squared is just 100. And there would be our equation for circle A. Our equation for circle B is going to be just a little bit different for circle B. Notice that the center of that is going to be at the point 4, -2. So when we write that in our equation, we are going to need some parentheses this time. And remember, once again, we are taking opposites. So opposite of 4 would be -4 for x. Opposite of -2 would be +2 for y. And let me make sure I fix that because I wrote x instead of y. So y plus 2. And now we just need to find our radius. The radius for our second circle is a distance of 3, it looks like. So then 3 squared would be 9. And there would be our equation for the second circle. Okay. Let's do one more example kind of like this, and then we'll talk about how to graph some circles of our own. So for this next example, the equation of our circle A is going to be based on its center first. So let's find that for our circle A. That's going to be the point 3, 4. Let's go ahead and put that into our equation. So we'll set up our two parentheses with both x and y being squared. For x, opposite of 3 is -3. For y, opposite of 4 is -4. And now let's go ahead and find our radius. So from here to here, that is a distance from 3 to 9 of 6. So take 6 and square it. It's going to be 36. And there's the equation of circle A. Let's do the same thing now with circle B. So for circle B, our center is going to be at the point -2, -2. So we'll go ahead and set that up first with both x and y inside of our parentheses being squared. And opposite of -2 is +2. And same thing for y. Opposite of -2 is +2. Now let's go ahead and find our radius. So from -2 out to -8, that is also a distance of 6. So if we take that and square it, that is once again 36. And there's going to be the other side of our equation. All right. Last two examples. We are almost done. So it wants us to sketch a circle with the given information. So it's got us with an equation here. And so first, let's go ahead and identify what the center is and the radius is. So remember, the center is going to be the opposite of those numbers you see inside the parentheses. So opposite of -4 is going to be +4. Opposite of -2 is going to be +2. So the center of our circle is going to be at this point 4, 2. And then our radius is just going to be the square root of 16, which the square root of 16 is 4. So what we'll do, starting from our center, is we'll go out by 4 in every direction that we can. And I'm going to do that kind of in 4 different directions. We won't go diagonally, just straight to the right, left, up, and down. And then we'll just do our best to draw a circle through those points. Probably not going to be perfect, but just try your best there to get that circle to look kind of good. And there's going to be our circle. Let's do one more example kind of like this, and then that should be good for today. All right, so for this next one, let's start with finding our center. Opposite of +3 would be -3. Since y has nothing inside of a parentheses, obviously opposite of nothing would just be 0. So that's going to be our center, is going to be at 3, 0. Next, we'll look at the 25, and remember our radius is going to be the square root of that number. So the square root of 25, which is 5 this time. So starting from our center, we will go out 5 in every direction that we possibly can. So right, left, up and down. And then we will just do our best to go ahead and graph a circle through that. Again, doesn't need to be perfect, but make sure it looks something kind of like a circle. And then we will be all finished. Alright guys, so that is it. There's our last section. Like I said, not too bad. Just remember the center is opposites, radius is always squared, and I think you should be good with this section. Guys, have a great rest of your day, and this is it. So until next year, have a good rest of your day.